On today's episode of The Women of the World v Patrick Clancy, I'm going to prove that Lindsay Clancy's bedroom was staged using Bratz dolls and a shoebox reconstruction of the crime scene, because I noticed something that absolutely nobody else has noticed, not even the blood experts, and if they did notice, they strategically omitted it from their testimony because it proves that Lindsay Clancy is innocent. My only credentials are that my brain works like this, guys.
This is my design.
If you know, you know. And I'm a forensic files enthusiast, back to back. Everyone needs to see this, and the only way that I know how to explain it is by showing you. That's why I made the reconstruction. Please stay with me and watch this, because I'm going to be reenacting the scene the way that I see it when I look at the crime scene. This is your trigger warning. If you're sensitive to domestic violence and blood and graphic detail, do not watch this video. I've managed to semi-accurately dress Lindsay in a black tank top and jeans, but unfortunately my male Bratz doll didn't come with a weaker jawline, and he doesn't have accurate clothing to what Patrick was wearing other than the first pair of shoes, so excuse me for that. First, let's do a quick tour. This is the doorway, this is the navy shelves, this represents the mirror, blood spot A. This represents the pillow next to the mirror, the pillowcase next to the mirror. I've just drawn some blue on the floor. Lindsay's slippers, the green tub, assorted linens I've just depicted using just a pencil here just for reference, blood spot B, blood spot C, and our drawers along with our knife. And I've roughly indicated where the cups were and the spray bottles on the bedside table there. Then we have our Lindsay, the phone on the bed. Excuse the old vintage phone, wasn't really a thing back when Bratz dolls were made. I saw the theory that Lindsay had the window shut on her neck, but unfortunately I have a more plausible explanation as to what's happened to Lindsay and why her thyroid was crushed, so let's get into it. I've also made sure I can move the bed because it's vitally important, and what kicked this off for me is what I saw when I saw the blood and the bed. Okay, from the top, here's our Lindsay. Our Lindsay is sleeping. I think that the Benadryl in the cup full of lemonade wasn't a suicide attempt, it was a sleep aid. Our Lindsay was sleeping, and she was probably sleeping a long time before this kicked off. What I'm alleging has happened is Lindsay has been rendered unconscious, and that is what has caused her thyroid injury. The safest thing to do was to turn off the Apple Watch to make sure it wasn't tracking any of her movement, because any movement from her part or lack thereof was going to be suspicious. He took the Apple Watch downstairs with him to the basement, turned it back on, and then used it to send himself a work email so that it would be reasonably explained that he had nothing to do with her Apple Watch activity. Then I'm alleging that he dragged her unconscious body to the edge of the bed and sat her facing the mirror because he needed to see what he was doing. His plan was to be able to hold her upright and make every single wound look self-inflicted. When he cut her wrist and caused blood spot A, he realized that it's going to be impossible to keep her limp body upright and keep blood off himself, especially if she started to stir from deep pain stimulus in that wrist. So what does he do? He panics. Our Lindsay is still bleeding off the edge of the bed because her hand has been positioned there. She's unconscious, and he moves the bed, which then causes the blood to travel. Excuse the length ratio here, it's not perfectly to scale, but it explains the blood trail from blood spot A over here without any touching on the bed. Next, what does he do? He gets back on the bed, positions our Lindsay back upright. He knows he still can't get any blood on the bed, but he has to make it look like she's up and standing and moving around voluntarily, right? He struggles to fling her unconscious body, which may or may not have caused the only spatter transfer in the bedroom on the mirror. He then maneuvers her body this way, creating this blood trail up here, and then positions her on the bed, creating blood spot B. After he panicked and dragged the bed, I think that's when the blood spots happened by the door, and that's also when he pressed the push lock with bloody gloves to make sure the kids couldn't come up and interrupt him. So we've left a trail up to blood spot B. I'm alleging that Lindsay's already bleeding wrist is limp and hanging downwards, and nothing but gravity is causing these passive blood droplets on the floor. So from here, he realizes it's going to be challenging to grab the knife and return it to this side table, which would be his workstation. So what does he do? He moves it. It's possible that during that process, he actually dropped the knife because there was a spatter pattern and some small impact around this little puddle. But I'm not sure the chronology of events. But now he's got access to that bedside, he can reach it, and he can work on this other wrist. He then cuts her right wrist, which creates blood spot C. And again, she's limp. Her arms are positioned. Forgive the Bratz dolls again. They're not going to be exact. But her arms are limp over the bed. That's why he moved the bed, so that he can wedge her and press her up against it. Make sure she stays asleep and make sure she stays still so no blood gets on the bed, meaning no blood gets on him. I'm not sure if he moved the curtain before or after he moved the side table, but this transfer pattern I think is from him with his gloved up hands moving the curtain to the side. So I'm not sure if he did that when he moved the side table or did that just before he put her through the window. It could have been either or, but it's to make room. Same with this curtain here. I'm alleging it was moved out of the way because there's still blood droplets at the base of where the curtains were, but none on the actual curtains. So I'm thinking they were out of the way. I think he brought her chest up and then he cut her neck. But because he didn't have the mirror to see, he wasn't sure if he cut the carotid artery. That's why it was superficial, but yet still bleeding. Maybe not as actively as the rest, but it's because he can't see. Now he has to get her through the window. So I'm thinking her right wrist went first. And that's what started the transfer pattern here on the exterior of the window, next to that odd orange silicone or whatever it was on the exterior. And from the inside, while he's trying to do that, this wrist is now bleeding more freely in this direction. And he brings her arm over, again being mindful not to get blood on himself. And that's where we see this transfer pattern on the interior of the window. So once her arms are out, he then pushes her forward and she's on by her hips. The reason I don't subscribe to the idea that he slammed her neck in the window is because he needed her unconscious well before that, but also there's no real blood on the center of that window, only transfer on the outside and on the inside on opposite sides. So he has her out by her hips, and it's at least a few seconds that she's dangling unconscious here, which is where our exterior blood patterns come from. The prosecution reckons that there was blood in between here, but I disagree. I don't think it looks like blood at all. I think it just looks like general stains on the exterior of the house that have nothing to do with it, and she never tested it, so I'm just ignoring it. So that's not there. Just these two marks that were obviously from her wrist, and then down here on the ledge of the window where it was obviously from her hands on the way down. And then he drops her. And there she is outside on the snow, well in advance of any of this being put into motion. And there he is. He's finished with Lindsay, and now he has to set the rest of the scene. Now here's my smoking gun. The curtains are returned to normal, and he starts to examine the room and try to figure out what looks unnatural. So he moves the bedside table back to where it was. And what does he do? He doesn't realize no blood on the curtain behind it, which is inconsistent with the amount of action going on the surface of that table. But the most important mistake he made is right down here. because underneath that side table leg are two perfectly circular passive blood drops from when he was working on her before. And he's just moved this bedside table directly over the top of those blood stains, which means the scene was staged, because nowhere in this room, in this situation, in any of this blood, in any of this action, nowhere are Lindsay's fingerprints. If she was bleeding and doing all of this herself, her fingerprints would be on either side of this table. He's moved it and put it back over those blood droplets unknowingly to make it look as natural as possible, as though she came over here, stood there, cut her wrists and went out the window, when that's obviously not what has happened. Based on the way Patrick Clancy told on himself on the stand, I can reasonably predict what happened with the rest of the timeline. Lindsay going out the window, going to CVS, returning home, and then going to the restaurant, then returning home again. But I want to focus on the bedroom. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I need to explain this stain. I think when Patrick got back from CVS, he realised he made a mistake, went upstairs and returned the Apple Watch to the drawer because it stopped tracking Lindsay's heart rate. He needed to put it back to make it look like she had been responsible for those movements. Then he got blood on his shoes rushing to do that, panicked, took the shoes off, took them down to the basement where he did some other deeds as well. He changed his shoes, took the boots and whatever other bloody paraphernalia he had that he needed to get rid of, likely went back through those woods to then go to the restaurant to pick up the food. If you got chills just like I did when I noticed this, please share this video. I want it to reach Kevin Riddington because this is one of the most concrete pieces of evidence for the defense that I have seen so far, other than the email. And it's been completely ignored and gone unnoticed.